From the Chicago Sun-Times newsroom, I'm Natasha Korecki, and this is Off Message, our weekly political talk show. Joining me this week is Fran Spielman, our City Hall reporter. We have Mick, the political reporter from the Chicago Reader, and Dan Mihalopoulos, our early and often columnist and watchdog reporter. This week we are going to be talking a little bit more about this new financial time bomb that could go off. Dan, you reported about this. Can you just give us a bottom line, what's going on here and what does Chicago face?
Right, let's skip over the explanation of bond issues and swaps and get right to the bottom line. There's a clause in these deals that were entered into under the previous administration, under Richard M. Daley's City Hall, which says that if the city's bond rating drops below a certain level, then these swap arrangements can be undone, can be ended by the financial institutions that entered into these deals with the city, and then the city can then be liable to pay whatever the value of those deals is. So if Moodys brings them down any lower, then they could face, I estimated, about $110 million initially. They drop it a couple more notches, and you're talking about $200 million. So it could potentially be a big deal.
Okay, so we're saying that, from your estimation, a couple $100 million possible. So what is the major problem for Chicago here? What's a couple $100 million?
What's a couple $100 million on top of all the other bills that are in the hundreds of millions of dollars that they haven't figured out how they're going to pay? It's just more pressure on them to do what the ratings agencies want them to do, and it's either come up with more money or cut spending much more dramatically. So
Moodys has said there's certain things that you need to do, and part of it is fixing this whole issue with fire and police. Is that right?
Right. There's a $600 million mandatory pension payment that must be paid next year, and that is something that either has to be lifted by the legislature or let the city ramp up gradually. And then, of course, you have the teachers. That's another problem.
Oh, yeah, the teachers.
Yeah,
right.
That's a very large...
So is there any political will? I mean, it sounds like there's a tax increase needed here. Are we going to...
Or two or three.
Or two or three, but there's also November election, and then there's the aldermanic elections. Is there any out here in the near term?
Not in the short run. With the phone tax that was just passed down in Springfield, they're anticipating they're going to come up with enough money to get past the elections this fall and hopefully past the elections next winter, too, because the mayor and the aldermen definitely do not want to run after hiking the property taxes. What we're dealing with here, though, is this has gone on for years. And while it's very interesting to hear the Emanuel administration point to Richard M. Daley, a lot of these folks were there cheerleading Mayor Daley that whole time, Rahm Emanuel included. And, while Mayor Daley basically maxed out all of our credit cards and then went gambling to try to pay off the credit card debts. That's essentially what the situation is, and now the bills are all coming due. And we've got to get more money. We can't cut our way out of it entirely.
Daley didn't think beyond the end of his nose. When there was a financial problem, sell off the parking meters, sell off the skyways. When you do a swap like this, I guess it's a hedge against when interest rates go up. But what happens if the unthinkable happens and you get lowered to 3 levels above junk bonds? That's where we're at.
And that's where we're at right now.
Yeah, I think bring it back to Mayor Emanuel now, he came in saying that they're not going to kick the can down the road. And now with the police and fire payment, they're asking the legislature to put that off to 2023? And then they're talking about the property tax increase that he put forward. Our pollsters said that was the least popular option among people in Chicago, 2% support. And now he's putting that off for a while.
Who here is in favor of a huge property tax hike?
But is that not kicking the can down the road?
It is, but here's his argument. His argument is if you raise property taxes that high, that fast, you'll have a mass exodus to the suburbs. People won't be able to afford their homes. So you've got to ramp up a little more gradually. That's his argument, and it's a good one.
But 3 years down the road, they know they're still going to have to deal with this to keep their homes. I think it's a huge problem.
Well, and the other thing is that Rahm should have raised the property tax every year since he's been in.
So does that go against his argument that it was Daley who was postponing things?
Well, Daley didn't raise property taxes 17 out of 22 years that he was in office. One year, he took the flush pension funds and took that money and gave a property tax cut.
But Emanuel's continuing.
I mean, really, when you get down to it, the property tax should be going up every year a little bit because we have pension payments that are going up every year, and we've got to have some kind of a base that keeps pace with that.
The other interesting thing is that some of the revenue streams actually have gotten better under Emanuel while this has all happened. Like The real estate transfer taxes, which Daley feasted on for several years, of course dropped when the whole economy imploded, and those have started to come back up. So some of the revenue is actually still coming in, but it's not enough to deal
I
with
still
this.
think that behind all of this is going to be the sales tax on services, the ROM tax. I think we're going to see that. I think that could become a statewide solution to the statewide problem
We've
of
been
police
hearing
and
a
fire
lot of that
pensions.
in the gubernatorial campaign as
Yeah.
well. Looking at over the next course of the year, after we get past certain elections, are we going to...
Katie, bar the door. Look
Yeah.
out. Hold on to your wallet.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you talk about sticker shock, you look at some of the people that have bought houses for huge amounts of money in the city before the decline of the real estate market, some during the decline, and some now again that it's starting to come back are paying massive amounts. Their property taxes are a fraction of what they would be in the suburbs.
Right.
And real quickly, the tax increment financing program is diverting nearly $500 million every single year. There are still some of these other kiddies that both mayors have relied on to spread goodies around, and you're going to have to start looking at all this stuff
You
too.
think Ron will ever do that?
Well, he doesn't want to because he wants to be able to build Obama Prep and take $60 million for that.
He doesn't have money, and then suddenly
He has
Obama
it.
Prep, DePaul
Yeah,
Arena.
absolutely.
People are like, where's this money coming
Right.
from, and
There's
why are
a
you
real
asking?
disconnect.
We had to close 50 schools, but then
We're
we're going to
opening.
open some more.
Well, and that's why when you ask people, should your property taxes go up, there's 2% of people are for that. Well, let's shift gears a little bit. Here, another big historic moment for the city of Chicago this week.
This is a new day in the city of Chicago. It's a day in which what you know is more important than who you know, and when it comes to employment and being hired by city employees.
So is all well in City Hall, and there will be no more patronage.
No, I didn't say that. It was a historic moment, though. You don't have the mayor of Chicago running to federal court with his entire cabinet
Not unless he's subpoenaed, right?
unless he thinks he's going to score huge points politically for having accomplished something that the city's been trying to do for 45 years and that has been extremely costly and something that his predecessor could not do. But Rahm Emanuel's parade was rained on a little bit. The son of former Alderman Bernie Stone, Jay Stone, who had run for alderman, said that Emanuel had been elected to Congress in 2002 with the help of two illegal patronage armies run by Donald Tomczak and Dan
And
Catalinic,
this
both
was-
of whom were convicted.
This is
in
during the
scandal.
court hearing that he
Yes,
says
and
this.
Rahm Emanuel sitting a few feet away, and he said, "Don't give him the ability to police himself. He's not the guy. He's part of the problem. He stole the 2002 election." Afterwards, I asked the mayor if he felt any regrets having gotten that help from the Tomczak army, and he said, "That's 12 years ago. Everything's been talked about already."
Has he
Ancient
changed?
history by now.
Well, I think the answer that he's given in the past was that he wasn't aware of that, and it's really hard to believe that somebody that's as involved in everything that they're involved in as Rahm Emanuel did not know who all these people were that were showing up to help his
500.
campaign.
It's
But
impossible to
right,
believe.
Does he still have a patronage army?
No. I mean, when you compare it to what happened under Daley, who rebuilt the machine, or it was rebuilt, I should say, under him and for him, that was a situation from day one. They said, here's a list of who worked for us, and this is what jobs they want, and this is their second choice and their third choice. I mean, you remember all this came out after the federal corruption investigation, the federal charges against his aides.
It always amazes me how many different politicians over the years have kept these master lists of their
Put
clout
it in
lists.
writing.
Put it
Can
in
you believe
writing
it?
and right. Okay, with that, let's shift gears to the quote of the week. Fran, why don't we start with you?
To do this job, you don't always have to be a jerk. And that's Matt Hines, the mayor's legislative liaison, talking about leaving government and what he learned from his father, Tom Hines, about what to do and how to handle people.
Was he referring to himself or Rahm Emanuel?
And did you ask him how often he had to be a jerk and to whom?
Right.
Mick, what do you got?
I don't think anyone anticipated a $2.5 million campaign contribution. And that's from State Senator Don Harmon, who is the author of a law that actually places a limit on campaign contributions, but has this enormous loophole that if you're wealthy enough to self-fund your campaign, then the limits actually are removed. So that's how Bruce Rauner can get a $2.5 million campaign contribution in one fell swoop from his friend Ken Griffin.
And maybe that's just a first installment. We don't even know yet, right?
I don't know if this is the quote of the week, but it's certainly the understatement of the week, and it comes from the guest editorial that Mayor Emanuel and his aide Sue Choi penned for our newspaper in which he
Personally,
rewrote
right?
Chicago. Yeah, he rewrote Chicago History 101 by talking about the Shakman case. It says, by 2005, that system remained largely unreformed. Meaning the hiring system was largely unreformed. Yeah, it's largely
tests,
unreformed when
color-coded charts.
the feds say there's a massive fraud involving people in the mayor's office.
Okay, and then I'm going to close with Evelyn Sanguinetti, who is Bruce Rauner's running mate. She was speaking about women. When we knock on doors, something magical happens. They let us in. This is where we use our special powers to disarm them. And she went on to talk about the special powers and magical powers of women. With that, thank you very much to our wonderful panel, and join us again next week on Off Message.
All our hopes are pinned upon you and the magic that you do.